Hi, everyone. So I'm Jack Deakin, Head of Business Development and Partnerships at Toyow. And today I'm joined by Asal Alizaid and George Kushner. Asal leads BASE in the MENA region, helping BASE builders in the Middle East and North Africa to grow further. Coming from computer engineering, Web3 incubation, and an acceleration background, Asal is pivotal in supporting the success of builders, investors, traders, and businesses on BASE within the MENA region, bringing the new wave of users on chain. George is our Chief Business Officer at Toyow and is fundamental in driving the long-term business objectives, intertwining tokenization for real-world asset owners, and democratizing access for the wider institutional and retail investor base globally. For those of you who don't know, Toyow is an RWA marketplace launching on BASE, enabling the tokenization, listing, and trading of real-world assets across 4 core industries: real estate, commodities, film, and music. In addition to that, there are many more, such as classic cars, sports leagues, and collectibles. But the 4 that I mentioned are the ones that we focus on. So to kick things off, I'd love to start with a quick intro, a little bit about your journey. Perhaps, Asal, you could start.
Yeah, sure. First of all, hello everyone. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me. You mentioned almost everything. I lead BASE in MENA region. My background is computer engineering, but since 2017 I joined the Web3 space, and I started with being a pure fan of Bitcoin and starting with basically exploring the world of ICOs back in the days, exploring different projects that were popping up back in 2018, and worked a little bit mostly in the investor side and due diligence side, trying to wear my technical hat and understand what the new projects in this space are doing. But it's crazy how our industry has evolved, and from those projects that were pure crypto and pure speculation, we have reached to the point that now we are talking about real assets and way more tangible assets that we are having on chain. So before BASE, I was mainly focused on incubation and acceleration of startups in Web3, and I have been with BASE leading the efforts in Middle East and North Africa. Our main goal is obviously bringing the next wave of adoption and users on chain, and we believe that with the infrastructure that BASE is providing and the products that builders like you are building, we will have this opportunity to actually onboard new audience to our industry and actually show the strength and use the strength of freedom within the on-chain world.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a great experience. Thank you very much. George, perhaps you can share the same from your perspective.
Sure. My journey began, a couple odd decades ago, and I grew up in as the cool kids now call it, the TradFi space. I used to know it as financial services, but now it's morphed into traditional finance. And I grew up in the institutional fixed income derivative sales world. I was covering banks in the US and Europe, and hedge funds and central banks and pension plans, asset managers all over. And then I morphed over into the buy side and worked for some very large asset managers, all in the alternative investment world. So again, hedge funds, private equity real estate, venture capital. And I finished my quote TradFi career in 2021, I guess, maybe, with Wells Fargo Private Bank. My Web3 journey began initially, I guess, in 2015, when a colleague of mine came up to me one day at BlackRock in Manhattan, and he said, "Hey, what do you think about Bitcoin?" And since this is a family show, I'll be a gentleman, but let's just say my response was, I didn't think much about Bitcoin, but I was a little bit more graphic than that. And that was the end of the conversation. A few years later, I kept hearing more and more about blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology. And as I get older, I become much more inquisitive, and I realize that although decades ago I knew everything about everything, today I know nothing about anything. So I decided to shut my mouth, listen, and learn. I jumped down the rabbit hole to try and study this technology. had my aha moment, and I've been hooked ever since. And actually, I launched a US-based, US-compliant digital asset marketplace or cryptocurrency exchange. Met up with Toyow about a year ago, was fascinated with the breadth, depth, scope, and scale of what they're doing, and not just being single-threaded, single vertical, single asset, if you will. This whole notion of an Amazon marketplace for real-world assets really appealed for me. And I think real-world assets, for my humble opinion, are one of the three-legged stool that really is going to drive mass and broad adoption of digital assets across the world. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm curious to know what you think the other two legs are, but we could save that for another day. Both of you have some great experience, and really, I think we're all here today because we're seeing a lot of momentum around RWAs. The market is, I think, hitting a bit of a turning point in terms of the adoption that is being seen, both institutionally, globally, and everywhere else. So from your perspectives, I'm curious to understand what you guys think is actually driving this shift right now. Is it investor-led? Is it asset owner-led? Is it somewhere else? So perhaps one of you, maybe George, you can start things off from your perspective, and then we can jump to Asel.
Sure. I think that it is a bit of the chicken or the egg with regards to, is it asset owner driving or is it the investor? I think for my money's worth, if I had to think about a teeter-totter, it might skew slightly more towards the asset owner, actually. I think, when we're speaking about digital asset owners, I think this statistic I'm about to throw out is widely unknown. I think that most people in our ecosystem and sphere just presume everyone in the world owns digital assets, and absolutely positively nothing could be further from the truth. No one owns digital assets. You're talking about 4 or 5% of the globe, 400 or 500 million out of 8 billion people. And I think people are just now starting to wake up to this. On the flip side, the asset owners, when you're starting to see really big firms that are moving into this space and look at it, I mentioned BlackRock, where I used to work. Now they're totally looking into this and they're being a pioneer in it. You have other firms that are now looking into the space, whether it's Apollo or, again, some really, really major asset owners. And I think what they're understanding is that, I keep thinking about this word equanimity, and maybe that's a little bit naive and aggressive, but the thing I love about it is from the asset owner standpoint, you're now able to unlock an asset, and we can pick on any asset, but specifically assets that are illiquid, they now become instantaneous liquid, and they don't have to worry about Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4:30 in the afternoon, or 9:30 till 4 in the afternoon here in the U.S. That you have instantaneous price discovery all around the world, 24/7, 365. And I think as more and more projects get out there, then the users will start seeing, wait a minute, I can now, for $10 have access. I use this example all the time of the Empire State Building in New York, or for $15, I can buy a portion of a Picasso painting. Yes, you will be able to very, very soon. So this is going to change the world in so many facets. You don't have to be relegated to institutional investors or accredited investors or qualified purchasers or all these different things. And it really, again, so that's why I keep thinking about this equanimity standpoint, in the fact that the asset owner gets equality because they have instantaneous assets and liquidity. And then from the investor standpoint, they too can now participate in all of these types of investments that up until now have been relegated to either institutional investors or, for the most part, ultra high net worth investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to jump in and give my view, but Asel, you sort of sit on the other side of the fence a little bit with the, on the chain and infrastructure side of things. How does that compare with what you're seeing in terms of the interest and adoption of RWA?
I believe George mentioned it perfectly. I think there is two sides that is driving this hype and this interest around RWAs from the both sides. One side is the digital asset owners, or let's say the Web3 audience. And obviously, I think for that side of the audience, it's more about survival. I think if crypto and Web3 and blockchain wanted to be only specific to Web3 native people and only around these assets that are just around speculation, then we couldn't really expect this industry to survive that long. So I think from that side, it's about survival. It's about actually dealing with real capital. As George mentioned, we always for us in Web3 space, we kind of feel like everybody has crypto, everybody knows what is blockchain. But in fact, if you actually look at the bigger picture, actually nobody knows it yet. And it's like the ratio is really, it's funny at the moment. So the first thing is, I think, the survival of the industry to actually deal with more tangible or real assets that can bring more value than just candles that are going up and down. And on the other hand, we have the traditional investors, and we have also the asset owners, the real asset owners. I think it's a bit funny that we call it real world assets because, at the end of the day, Bitcoin is also a real asset. But anyways, in this context, you know what I mean. From that side, also, obviously, it was very clear that this sort of freedom, this sort of liquidity, and this sort of composability that we have within the Web3 Web3 related financial markets was nowhere in the traditional assets, and they also needed this sort of freedom and specifically liquidity. I think liquidity is the main point, and how liquid these assets are now becoming. So I think these both sides are running this trend, and I don't think it will be a trend. It will be actually a game changer for all of the industry. Also facilitates the entrance of a lot of institutions that they have lower risk appetites. They understand these sort of asset classes, and they just want more efficient accessibility. I think those are all different parts that makes this really serious, and I think it can drive a lot of new adoption, new capital to our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just sort of following on from that, Asal, Base has obviously been quite public in its position and how it's building for builders, or how it's enabling builders, and how it's enabling for wider adoption. Where do you sort of see RWAs fitting into the Base ecosystem, and how is that sort of progressing?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think I don't want to say that RWAs are going to only exist on Base, but in my opinion, Base is a perfect home for RWAs, and also we love RWAs as well. The reason why I'm saying Base is a perfect home for RWAs is mainly because, first of all, the cost efficiency, like the cost of these sort of transactions on Base is first of all not comparable to the cost of these transactions in real world, obviously, but also compared to other ecosystems. I think the cost efficiency is an important point. But most importantly, I think it's about trust and the branding that we have around Base, considering that we come from being supported and incubated by Coinbase. And we still are continuing the values of Coinbase, always being security first, always being compliance first. So I think that plays a big role. When it comes to RWAs, we are talking about real world assets and real world capital and more of institutional capital. And I believe these investors and asset owners care about the brand and compliance of who they are working with. And in that sense, I think Base definitely has a lot to offer. And in addition to that, also, as you said, we are very builder focused, very builder first, and therefore we have a lot of toolings that makes the Web3 apps built on Base very user friendly, which I think the other part of this puzzle. That okay, even if we brought these assets on chain, is it really accessible for the normal investor to actually understand how to invest in it? With all the toolings that we have on Base and all these from Unchained Kit to like all of the other toolings that we have. I believe we are trying to make it easier and easier for the user to start interacting with these assets without even noticing sometimes that they are interacting with a blockchain. Again, it comes to, for example, the smart wallets that we have, Base app, and like a lot of other things that we can discuss about it later. But I think, yeah, it's a triangle of trust, cost efficiency, and then the user-friendly apps that can be built on Base.
Yeah, I know the adoption and making it user-friendly is one of the core principles that we've applied at Toyo. And I liked your analogy about trading on chain, but without necessarily knowing that you're on chain. And I think that's a key part of what we've set out to do. George, anything you'd like to add to that around the fit with the Base ecosystem from our perspective?
Well, I think a couple things. One is, I think Asal made a brilliant, beautiful comment. And man, did it remind me of something earlier in my career when she mentioned the real world asset and how funny that is that we're applying that to TradFi, if you will, or anything not in Web3. But language is super important. And I'll give you a great example. When I was in the alternative investment world, one of our biggest hurdles was that word, alternative investments. Well, what the heck? Who wants anything alternative? When you think about the word alternative, it can be an interesting word, alternative lifestyle, alternative medicine, alternative schools. Typically, these don't denote things that are positive and optimistic. And I was always like, well, let's just call them hedge strategies. So I think Asal and I, when we hang up from this call, we're going to form a nonprofit real quick, and we're going to call them NTAs. I've already thought of it, non-tokenized assets. So real world assets are gone. We're talking about non-tokenized assets because they are yet to be, and they will be. The thing about Base that I love, and boy, I hope I don't put my foot in my mouth, and Asal, if I do, just kind of wink and say, oh yeah, he's right. I think when we look at the Ethereum blockchain, not to be confused with Ether, the token, which is native, which drives me insane when people confuse the two. But it has a scaling issue. It has a transaction per second issue. And if you look at technologies like Base, that's exactly what they're doing. So, we're taking an old 1985 Volkswagen, but we're plopping in a Ferrari engine. And with Base, they have something called, I believe, optimistic rollup, which what they do, they can batch hundreds of thousands of transactions simultaneously. Everything is presumed to be accurate and correct unless it's challenged. And then if it's challenged, then it's not, it's thrown out. So if we think about that and what we're trying to do at Toyo, where we have potential investors and transactions all over the world, constant, I think you have to have a scaling mechanism, a transaction per second mechanism behind that. So going back to the user experience, they're not sitting there like dial up, like it's 1993 with AOL. No offense to that, but we've evolved a little bit. And so I think coming in with this technology that supercharges or creates this booster, if you will, that's something that's absolutely critical and crucial for our organization and what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We touched on speed and availability, as well as some of the challenges around batches and transaction speeds and things like that. From a marketplace and asset standpoint, what do you feel are like the real challenges in bringing RWAs on chain today? So sort of putting the infrastructure aside and looking at the assets themselves. George, I know this is something you've got a great take on given your experience, but what do you sort of see as other challenges that might exist in that sort of RWA environment or tokenization environment?
I'm sorry, what was the last part you said?
I was saying avoiding the RWA word, tokenization environment.
NTA, non-tokenized assets. Come on, man. We're after this call, hashtag NTA, non-tokenized assets. I think that it's a couple things. If you look at the macro and the broader picture, like Saul and I were just speaking a few minutes ago, still relatively no one in the world owns digital assets. I think that education is always paramount. Unfortunately, I think that our industry has a really, really poor PR globally. In the fact that, if you poll the average woman or man on the street and ask them what do they think about digital assets or crypto, they're still going to come out with something nefarious. And it's unfortunately that we as an industry don't do more to go out there and promote all the benefits, all the attributes, all the virtues that we know about. I think that getting assets on chain, as far as I'm concerned, that's honestly the easy part. I think right behind education, which is vital and maybe even more so vital than education, is the UX. The user experience in Web3 is abysmal, if I can be honest. I mean, every single time I've been in this space 8 years, I spent almost 3 decades on Wall Street selling derivatives to central banks. So I'm at least good with markets and know how to move things around here. And I'm sure everybody on this call can appreciate this. I don't double check. I don't triple check. I check 25 times before I hit send if I'm putting a wallet address in. And now with wallet poisoning and how they're, hijacking those, because everybody just checks the last 4 or 5 or 6 but that middle. Yeah. So it's gotten really, really even more treacherous out there. I do think, and people use this example all the time. Let's go back to Web 1. Static pages, dial up, took forever. I think most of you guys on the call don't even know what I'm talking about. You're too young to appreciate it, but go to YouTube and watch a video. You wouldn't believe it. So I think Web3 is in that same metamorphosis. We are still the pioneers. We are still the early adopters. I don't care that Bitcoin's been around since 2009 and cryptography's been around for many, 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 many decades. This iteration of what we're all trying to do is right here and right now today. And I think a lot of that has to do with governments around the world are finally starting to warm up. They're finally starting to embrace it. But those two things, Jack, outside of the assets getting on chain, which to me that's the easiest part by far and away. I think it's the educational component, and that user experience has got to really become, just like them going to buy something on Amazon. It needs to be that easy and that neat and that slick.
Yeah, I agree. I know from our experience, we sort of sit with one foot in the door in Web3 and one foot in the door in Web2, where we're dealing with people who are native with cryptocurrencies and RWA and tokenization, and then asset owners that are coming from a traditional or institutional space where they don't have too much familiarity, and likewise investors. Assel, you sort of sit one step further into the Web3 space within the base team and ecosystem. How does what George has shared sort of compare with how you guys see it?
I totally agree with George. I think like a lot of important challenges were mentioned. On the other hand, I think maybe the things that are missing at this point is that seems like we still don't have a standard way of, first of all, like treating these assets and distributing these assets. And what do I mean by that is composability of these assets. I should be able to tokenize my my car and be able to use that as a collateral in a DeFi protocol and be able to get a loan on it. These sort of connections between different parts of Web3, to some degree, in some of the ecosystems or some of the applications, they exist. But I'd say it's not still a unified standard where for a fact that your RWA or your tokenized asset actually will be acceptable within the Web3 space. So one part is the internal, I think, maturity that we need to reach to. The other part that I think is one of the challenges is, as George mentioned, still the education and also user experience is very important. It should be as easy as a merchant in Saudi to tokenize their invoices without being a Web3 native, Web3 PhD guy. So that should be solved for sure. And I think those are the main two important things. The other part, I think, is regulation that is still sometimes missing. It depends in which jurisdiction we are talking about. Fortunately for us in MENA, I think we have way more clarity. We have still way to grow, but I think we have more clarity, more regulation on what is accepted, what is actually official, and what is not. But I think still globally we need more regulation on this side, because as long as you go to a court and they don't accept that you own, like, your what is on your wallet doesn't reflect on your real ownership, I think we still have a long way to go. But yeah, I think from the infrastructure perspective, I think the composability is, I think, the main challenge that needs to be solved, and that will bring a lot of distribution, because I think at the moment somehow some of the platforms are very fragmented, that the asset on one platform really cannot flow freely within the on-chain world. And yeah, I think this needs to be solved over time.
Yeah, definitely. I think you answered possibly some of my next question there with what's missing. So, I I see and hear a lot of the similar points that you've mentioned. George, we talk about going from early users and early adopters through to sort of mass scale adoption. Assel mentioned some of the further use cases such as collateralization and aspects around legality and regulation and ownership. What do you sort of see as still missing for RWAs and tokenization to move from this early adoption phase to sort of real scalability beyond the obvious, which is people and users? Is there anything else that you see that's sort of still missing?
There is, and I think this is the third leg or the second leg to the stool that I mentioned, and that is regulatory clarity. Clearly, that is becoming more and more clear globally, but yet there still is no standard. Let's take the United States, where I live right now. Back in last July, we passed the Genius Bill, which is going to determine how stable coins are ruled and regulated and what they can do with regards to interest or no interest. And right now we're halfway through something called the Clarity Act, and Clarity is going to determine who in the United States governs what. The SEC will govern securities and the CFTC will govern commodities when it comes to digital assets. This is they almost do today, and that makes an awful lot of sense. I think that the Senate has already passed it. We're waiting on the Congress to pass it. Everybody is kind of hoping and praying it gets passed this year. I read every single day where institutional investors are gearing up, but they're not going to do anything until they know they're not going to have any blowback from the US government, or make sure that what they're investing in or building is legal and compliant. And I think what's interesting about Web3 is, the way I look at it is you had retail that started this whole thing, and institutional investors thought it was a joke, as I did many years ago. And now they're starting to realize this stuff is not a joke. And I think once this regulatory clarity gets stamped with approved, then you're going to have a massive flood of institutional adaptation. Then you're going to see the 7.5 billion men and women around the world that haven't invested or have digital assets in some way start to gain that. And by the way, we keep thinking about assets, but the reality is, going back to non-tokenized assets, should be non-tokenized things, because think about it, everything's going to be tokenized. I'm walking around in 2026 with a paper form of ID for my driver's license, my passport. I mean, that's insane. That's absolutely nuts that we don't have a universal way to put our mobile phone up and that's got all of our records. Same thing with health, same thing with insurance, same thing with logistics, same thing with medicine. I mean, law, it's just, ching, 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 ching down the line. So the broad-based applicability to blockchain, where it's going, and I know it sounds crazy, and gosh, I wish you guys knew me in 2015, but I think it's almost an infinite amount. And please, I'm not saying it's the panacea. It's, not the cure-all, the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it's just taking what we have today and really evolving it. I mean, we're running on global rails in some instances that are 1 to 200 years old, and it's time to evolve with speed and efficiency. And again, I think I didn't answer your question because I went all over, got a little bit tangential, but hopefully I answered a little bit of it. But I do think the future is extraordinarily bright with what's to come. And I think that once this regulatory clarity kicks off here in the US and the rest of the world starts doing their thing, we're really, really off to the races.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we've seen in the Middle East this sort of beneficial impact of regulatory clarity from the likes of VARA and ADGM and everybody else. And that has prompted, and I believe will continue to prompt, a lot of new businesses, but also existing businesses identifying an opportunity to be able to scale at pace in line with regulations. And that is obviously the end goal that you mentioned, George, is bringing that clarity to the forefront and being able to enable people to operate with confidence and security. So I think it's an underlying reoccurring theme. It's one that 5 years ago everybody was very negative about the idea of regulation. I think now everybody is sort of seeing the opposite side of the coin on that. But we've spoken a little bit about infrastructure and the adoption. We've got a quick demo of the Toyow marketplace, so it feels right to sort of follow that with a user journey from Ashish on the Toyow marketplace. Ashish is our head of product at Toyow. Perhaps Ashish, you can give a quick introduction to yourself and then take us through that journey.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. So I started my journey within the Web3 space in early days of Bitcoin, and my previous background is in peer-to-peer blockchain networks. And from that day, I keep on learning the new stuff that is coming within this ecosystem. I come with a background where I worked on different categories of solutions related to the identity, document management, tokenization on top of blockchain. And also I was actively involved in central bank digital currency that has nothing to do with public chains, mainly permission chains on a country-wide scale like India. And now I am excited to contribute to the Toyow journey, how Toyow is going to evolve as a multi-category marketplace. And I would like to demonstrate a demo of what we are building for this ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thanks.
So please confirm when you are able to see my screen.
Yep, we can.
Is demo screen visible to you guys clearly?
Yeah.
Great. So we will start with a quick demo how user journey will going to look like on the Toyow ecosystem. So user needs to start with create account. We have an option to select as an individual as a corporate account. If user selects an individual, he can continue and provide basic details about himself. Like my name. User can also view the terms and condition and privacy policy before accepting them. Then user need to validate his email. Set the PIN for quickly access and validate the transactions within the Toyow ecosystem. Confirm the PIN. So user is able to onboard within the ecosystem successfully. As we are working in the regulated space, so before user can purchase any asset and user need to complete the KYC process, and user can skip this step currently and explore the asset first. So I will try to show you the journey for the KYC quickly. I am using a sample ID for the same.
I hope he's doing a liveness check and we've not lost him. Ashish, are you still there? I think he's just completing the KYC process, but yeah. No, maybe not. We've lost him. Okay. Well, I'm sure if he comes back, we can resume it. Otherwise, you're back, Ashish.
Yeah, I was able to hear you guys. Not sure what was the issue, but I think you guys are not able to hear me back.
We can hear you now. We've lost your screen, but perhaps if you wanted to sort of resume, we can skip the KYC step and go from there.
Yeah.
When you did the liveness check, it cut off your camera.
Sure. So my KYC has been done successfully. I think Apple annoyingly doesn't allow to show that data. So that is why that step is not visible. But if I can show you guys, my KYC has been verified successfully. And now I will be able to show you how a user can seamlessly purchase an asset. So user can go to a particular asset. User can explore the details related to that particular asset.
And so where we have different asset categories, this is where the information will vary, right? So from real estate to film, for example.
So if user would like to invest based on the configuration for that particular asset, user can select the number of tokens that user would like to invest. Then user get two options, fiat and crypto. As my fiat balance is 0, if I select this, I need to add the funds first. I am selecting crypto for this demonstration. I would like to use TTN and I would like to use Base as a network. I need to agree with the terms and condition, and I need to go through the investment subscription agreement. Once user clicks on agree and confirms transfer, user can link any of the available wallets. Once payment confirmation is there, then asset will going to credit to the user account. So payment has been successful. Now user can go to the orders. So here user can see the asset purchase details. Within portfolio, user can now see what asset he has been purchased. If he would like to purchase any further tokens for the same asset, user simply needs to click on buy more tokens and the same flow has been activated. There are multiple categories asset like real estate, movies, music. User can explore those assets and put a purchase order on the same. And on the dashboard, user can track different stats for the asset that a user has been purchased so far. So this allow user to seamlessly access any type of asset within the ecosystem, put a purchase order, and track the dividends and yields distribution for that particular asset. That's all, Jack. You can take it up now.
Amazing. I think just to sort of follow on from that, so as we mentioned at the beginning, we're looking at the sort of core asset categories around real estate, film, music, commodities, where we see a lot of high interest from both asset owners and the investors. There is scope for that to expand and increase over time, and naturally we'll start to see a much wider variety of assets that are available on the marketplace. I'll just take the opportunity to sort of mention some of the assets that we have in the pipeline. And so there are assets in real estate tokenization of funds. We've got films and music that are already in the pipeline. So these will be coming to life and listed on the marketplace soon after launch. But now that we've seen the product and the platform, and very well done by Ashish, I think this is sort of our take on how we see the future shaping over the next few years. The seamless approach to usability, encouraging adoption, making the process of tokenization and the listing and access of those tokens to be tradable on the marketplace as seamless as possible for asset owners. And then also, educating investors about the opportunities that come with those assets on the marketplace. George, Asal, do you have any sort of final remarks around the future of the space through platforms, products, and things like that? Anything else that you'd like to add?
Ladies first.
Thank you so much, George. Yeah, I think what Ashish showed us was a proof of what we mentioned, that I think these platforms, we are now in the beginning of this way, and we are the early adapters and early movers. But you could see easily how seamless it is and how user friendly it is. I think the flow. The fact that you work with your email, you work with things that the user is already familiar with, and also with all these different wallet solutions that we have, and smart wallets especially, that we are focusing on at Base. We are removing that nightmare of seed phrases, which I think is a big move. And then the rest of the flow seemed really amazing, and the fact that you have the Batman movie next to a luxury villa next to all of these different asset classes, I think is just like so futuristic that I feel like this is going to be the operating system of the future, where we have everything marketplaces. And I don't think we are going to call them RWAs anymore in the future. I think after years, we are going to call them just assets, because they are just assets. And it's just a matter of like accessing them really easily with any sort of, asset under management that you have. You don't need to be a high net worth individual to get access to these sort of assets. And yeah, I think it was an amazing demo of why we think this can be the future of, at least a big part of the future of our industry. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, for the demo and for this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I really feel like this is going to be actually how these how these assets are going to evolve to a new group of investors, and that's super exciting.
Thanks, Hassel. George?
She did a brilliant job, and I should probably just shut up and end it right there. But I can't really add too much more to it. I think she hit the nail on the head on so many different things. I love the demo that Ashish did. Thank you very much. I think that goes back to helping solve this UX issue that we were describing just a little while ago, about how chunky and clunky and cumbersome and wonky it can be for a lot of users, but that seemed to be pretty straightforward and intuitive. And again, if they're setting up any type of financial account anywhere, this is a heck of a lot quicker and easier. That's for darn sure. I think the intuitive nature of how the tiles were set and what you can buy. And again, it's all hit the nail on the head. I mean, how many people in the world that are now going to be able to participate, whether it's owning a famous landmark in their city or owning a part of a music catalog of their famous artists, or being able to buy into the franchise of their famous film series that they love. And it just goes on and on and on and on. So I truly think we're at the precipice of this world-changing event. As I like to say, I truly look at all of us and all the men and women in this space as pioneers, even though we're now, 16, 17 years in of this, at least with Bitcoin. And I think the future is extraordinarily bright. For my money's worth, every asset under the sun is going to be tokenized. It's not a matter of if, but when. Right now, you're talking about a tokenization, a non-tokenized asset world. of, call it $475 trillion. Today, tokenized asset world is about 350 billion, so less than 1/1000th. And the future is just incredibly exciting. And thank you so much for the time. It was super nice meeting the lovely panelists and guests, and I really enjoyed the invite. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just briefly before we wrap up then, so a quick announcement. Following the demo that Ashish has shared, that demo will also be available online for anybody who wants to be able to go and have a look at it. We've now opened the waitlist alongside the demo. So the goal is to onboard early users, pioneers, whoever feels that they have a strong interest in tokenization or some of the categories that we've mentioned. And anybody who wants to sort of be the first to participate in the upcoming tokenized assets on our marketplace. A lot of those assets have already been mentioned and highlighted on Twitter, but there'll be more to come on that. So for the first 2,000 users on the waiting list, we're offering 500 TTN credits. Those credits will be usable inside the marketplace to buy tokenized assets, such as the ones that we've mentioned, as well as access to a private community for early adopters and drops. So anybody who is interested in getting involved, then obviously the waiting list will be live, and you can do so via there. Otherwise, I'll take the opportunity just to say thanks again to Asal, George, Ashish for all of the input and the demo. Look forward to being able to continue the conversation and catching up in a few weeks or a few months when one, we're live, but two, also as things progress in the space. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.